morning chaos, rolling suitcases, murmured phone calls, and the constant hum of departures echoing off high glass ceilings. Amid the noise, Carter sat quietly by gate B-27, her leather duffel tucked neatly beneath her chair. To anyone passing by, she looked like a regular traveler, composed, polite, even forgettable. She was reading a weather report on her tablet, though not like an ordinary passenger checking for turbulence. Her eyes scanned data the way a pilot reads the sky, instinctively, with quiet calculation. She wore jeans, a navy jacket, and a calm expression that revealed nothing. The only hint of her past, a small silver Air Force pin attached to her carry-on strap, gleamed faintly whenever light hit it. Most people wouldn't have noticed, but for those who would, that pin carried a history no one in the terminal could have imagined. The boarding announcement broke her focus. Flight 187 to Washington, D.C., now boarding Group A, stood, adjusted her jacket, and stepped into line behind a man juggling a coffee and briefcase. The gate attendant scanned her ticket, smiled mechanically, and said, "Enjoy your flight, Ms. Carter." "Thank you," replied with a small nod. Her tone was soft but precise, habitually controlled, the voice of someone used to being listened to. Inside the plane, she took her seat by the window 12A. She placed her bag under the seat in front, fastened her belt, and stared through the glass at the runway lights shimmering against the dark horizon. She made this trip dozens of times since leaving the Air Force 3 years earlier, but this one felt different. Maybe it was the heaviness in her chest, or the faint headache that had been building all morning, or maybe it was something else, something in the air. As the engines roared to life, the usual chatter of passengers filled the cabin, families comparing destinations, businessmen discussing contracts, flight attendants giving safety demonstrations no one paid attention to. Barely heard any of it. She focused instead on the rhythm of the engines, the subtle vibrations under her seat, and the way the aircraft rolled onto the taxiway. Old habits never died. Once a pilot, always a pilot, even when you're just a passenger. The aircraft accelerated down the runway, lifting smoothly into the cold morning sky. The light blinked off. Passengers relaxed, leaned back, letting herself breathe for the first time that day. She pulled out her tablet again, flipping to radar imagery over the mid-Atlantic, part curiosity, part instinct. That's when she noticed it. A strange interference signal. Small, almost imperceptible. The kind you only catch if you've spent years tracking airspace anomalies. Her brow furrowed. It wasn't coming from weather systems or nearby traffic. It was a frequency spike, erratic, moving across channels used only by military-grade communications. She blinked and sat upright, trying to shake it off. "Probably nothing," she murmured, but the unease grew. Her fingers tapped the side of her armrest, a subtle rhythm she used to steady herself before a mission. Then the turbulence hit. It wasn't gentle. The plane jolted hard, dropping fast enough to send a wave of gasps through the cabin. Luggage shifted in overhead bins. A baby cried. The captain's voice crackled through the intercom, strained but steady. "Ladies, and we're experiencing a little unexpected turbulence. Please remain seated." His heart rate didn't spike, but her focus sharpened. She stared at the wing, calculating wind direction, roll, altitude, loss. None of it matched turbulence patterns. She could feel it in her gut. This wasn't weather. This was interference. When the aircraft stabilized, the man beside her exhaled shakily. "Guess the skis don't like us today," he said with a nervous laugh. Offered a small, polite smile. "Something like that," she replied. But inside, her mind raced. Years of combat training hummed alive beneath her calm exterior. Something was wrong. The captain's tone earlier had been too uncertain. The instruments flickered at the wrong time, and that frequency she'd seen, it wasn't random. As the aircraft leveled out at 30,000 feet, reached down to her bag and brushed her fingers over a slim black device hidden inside. A secure communication terminal she wasn't supposed to have anymore. Her thumb hesitated over the activation switch. If she was right, She was about to break federal protocol for the first time in 3 years. If she was wrong, she'd just scare everyone for nothing. Took one last look around the quiet cabin, the sleeping passengers, the blinking exit sign, the distant hum of the engines. Then she whispered to herself, voice calm, deliberate, and chillingly familiar to anyone who'd ever served under her command. Let's see if the sky remembers me. The cabin lights dimmed as Flight 187 settled into its cruising altitude. The sign remained on longer than usual, though most passengers had already begun to relax. Flight attendants moved slowly up the aisle, offering smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. Carter sat motionless, eyes on her tablet, but her attention was miles above the earth. The faint interference she'd seen earlier hadn't disappeared, it was stronger now, pulsing like a heartbeat across restricted frequencies. She recognized the pattern instantly. It wasn't static, it was coded. Someone or something was transmitting. Her fingers hovered over her bag again. Inside lay the small black communication device, a relic from her Air Force days, one that should have been destroyed when she left the service, but had kept it, more out of instinct than defiance. Something inside her had whispered she might need it again. And now, staring at the irregular waveforms on her tablet screen, that voice was screaming. The plane jolted again, sharper this time. Passengers gasped, clutching their armrests. Drinks spilled and a baby started crying somewhere near the back. Closed her eyes briefly, centering herself the way she used to before combat missions. The aircraft leveled out, but something was wrong. She could feel it. Pilots had a sixth sense for danger, and had never failed her. Then a faint sound from the cockpit caught her attention, a chime followed by hurried voices. The reinforced door cracked open for a second as a flight attendant stepped inside. Glimpsed the co-pilot's face, pale, tense, and covered in sweat. That wasn't turbulence. That was fear. The intercom came alive again, this time with static cutting through every word. Ladies, and we're experiencing a technical issue with one of our navigation systems. Nothing to worry about. Please remain seated. Nothing to worry about. That phrase, thought grimly, had been uttered right before every disaster she'd ever witnessed. Her heart rate remained steady, but her breathing grew deliberate. Calm wasn't optional, it was survival. She pulled her duffel closer, unzipped it slightly, and the encrypted device. It was the size of a deck of cards, matte black and completely unmarked. She pressed her thumb against the biometric pad. The screen flickered to life, glowing faintly blue. Access granted. Ravenian CRYPTD channel. For a moment she hesitated. She promised herself she would never use this channel again. It was a direct line to a system she'd left behind, the same system that had once used her as its most trusted weapon. But then the plane shuddered again, dropping just enough for people to scream. Decision made. Fingers moved fast, typing a code sequence she hadn't touched in years. Her training took over, no hesitation, no fear, just precision. The signal bounced through secured satellites, a silent flare that would appear only on one network in the world, NORAD Command. Message sent, Raven Actual REQESTING Assistance, Priority 1. The device blinked once and went dark. Leaned back in her seat, her face calm but her pulse pounding in her neck. It was done. Somewhere, a command center in Colorado Springs was now wide awake and very confused. "Are you okay, ma'am?" a flight attendant asked nervously, noticing stillness. "I'm fine," said, her voice calm and precise. "Just keep everyone seated." The attendant nodded, sensing authority she couldn't explain, and hurried off. Up front, inside the cockpit, panic was spreading quietly. Both pilots were trying to reboot the navigation system, but the instruments weren't responding. The co-pilot's headset crackled with bursts of distorted static, no clear words, just noise. And then, deep in NORAD's underground facility, a young radar technician frowned at his console. A red-coded alert flashed across his monitor. Sir," he called out. We just got a signal through the old encrypted Raven channel. The duty officer, a colonel with 30 years of service, turned sharply. That's impossible. Raven Actual was decommissioned 3 years ago. I know, sir, but the signal's clean, full authentication key. The colonel stepped closer, his face hardening. Patch it through. I want a location. Coordinates place the signal at 30,000 feet, the technician said, his voice tightening. Over the eastern corridor, civilian flight path. The colonel's heart sank. A commercial plane. Yes, sir. Flight 187, Denver to D.C. For a long moment the control room went silent. Then, with grim resolve, the colonel barked, "Scramble 2 Raptors from Langley. I want eyes on that plane in 10 minutes." Back aboard Flight 187, sat perfectly still, unaware of the chaos she just unleashed below. She simply closed her eyes, listening to the hum of the engines, whispering under her breath the words she'd sworn never to use again. Raven Actual back on deck. The vast night above the Atlantic corridor, the sky stretched like black glass. Flight 187 cut through it, a lone spark in the darkness. Inside the cockpit, the captain's knuckles were white on the controls. Every instrument light flickered in a sickening rhythm. The navigation systems had gone dead. The radar was useless. Even the compass needle spun like it had lost its mind. "Control, this is Flight 187, the captain tried again. Static. He glanced at his co-pilot, who shook his head, sweat dripping down his temple. "We've lost all communication channels." Back in the cabin, passengers murmured prayers. Some clutched phones with no signal, others stared out into the void, searching for anything, another plane, a light, a miracle. Carter remained motionless in seat 12A, eyes sharp, her mind replaying every scenario she'd ever studied. She knew what total communication blackout meant. It wasn't just a system failure. It was external. Someone or something was jamming the signal. Far below them, NORAD's underground command center roared to life. Sirens blared, consoles lit up and scrambled to their stations. "Raven Actual signal confirmed," shouted a technician. "Coordinates 30,000 feet heading east." Colonel Beck stormed across the floor. "Get Langley on the line. I want 2 Raptors airborne 5 minutes ago." "Yes, sir." Moments later, on the tarmac of Langley Air Force Base, 2 F-22 Raptors roared to life. The night air vibrated with thunder as pilots climbed into their cockpits. Captain Mason, Eagle Lead Davis, and his wingman, Lieutenant Harper, Hawk 2 Rhodes, strapped in, voices steady through their headsets. "Eagle Lead ready for scramble." "Copy, Hawk 2 ready." "Tower to Eagles, you are cleared hot. Mission code Raven." Both men froze. "Say again, Tower," Davis asked, disbelief threading through his voice. "Mission code Raven, repeat Raven, confirmed by NORAD command." Davis exchanged a look with Rhodes. The call sign hit like lightning. "Raven Actual," he whispered. "That can't be right, she's gone." The tower voice replied, grim and certain, "Not anymore." Engines flamed. The Raptors tore down the runway and disappeared into the clouds. 20 minutes later, they were climbing fast through thin air, radar sweeping for the target. "Visual range 5 miles, Harper called out. "Civilian 737 ahead, lights flickering, looks unstable." "Copy," Davis said, his eyes narrowing. "Let's go get a closer look." As they approached, the silence was eerie. No radio beacon, no identification transponder, just a ghost gliding through the sky. "Flight 187, this is Eagle Lead of the U.S. Air Force. Identify immediately," Davis transmitted. "Nothing. Repeat, identify." The channel crackled once, then went dead again. "Maybe their comms are fried," Harper suggested. "Maybe," Davis murmured, "but that signal earlier, Raven Actual, how the hell?" Before he could finish, a faint voice cut through the static. "Eagle Lead, this is Raven Actual." Every hair on his neck stood up. Harper's hand froze over the throttle. Say again, Davis whispered. This is Raven Actual, the voice repeated, calm, composed, unmistakably female. Confirm visual on civilian aircraft, tail number N8471. Davis's throat went dry. Affirmative, Raven Actual, but that's a passenger flight. Who am I talking to? A pause, then. You're talking to the one who kept you all alive over the Pacific, Captain Davis. Maintain position. We've got a plane to save. For a moment, neither pilot spoke. Harper broke the silence first. Sir, that's Major Carter. Davis's voice trembled slightly, half whisper, half reverence. Raven. In the NORAD command center, controllers listened in stunned silence as the signal confirmed her identity. The commander exhaled slowly. Patch me through to Air Force Base. Prepare for emergency runway clearance. The legend's back. Above the clouds, Davis steadied his jet alongside Flight 187. He could see the flicker of the cabin lights, the terrified faces pressed against windows. And there, just visible through one, was her. Calm, focused. The same look she'd worn years ago before taking control of chaos. Eagle lead to NORAD, he said, voice steady again. Raven Actual is in command, she's alive, and she's flying this bird from the inside. Adjusted her headset, her tone sharp as steel. Welcome to my sky, boys. Let's get these people home. The cockpit door opened just enough for Carter to see the panic inside. Warning lights flashed across the control panel in angry red bursts. The captain was sweating through his uniform, and the co-pilot's hands shook as he adjusted dead instruments that refused to obey. Ma'am, please return to your seat, the captain said, voice trembling. His reply was calm but absolute. Your left stabilizer is overcompensating. Kill the autopilot and realign manually. The captain blinked. What? Do it, she said quietly, her tone leaving no room for question. You've lost digital control. Switch to analog, trust the hardware. For a heartbeat he hesitated. Then instinct, or maybe something in her voice, made him obey. He flipped the switch. The plane jolted once, then steadied. How did you know? I flew one of these for 10 years, said, sliding into the jump seat behind him. Well, not commercial, but close enough. The co-pilot turned, disbelief etched on his face. Your Air Force. Was, she corrected softly. Now focus. Her eyes scanned the panels with surgical precision. She spotted the flicker on the secondary display, signal interference pulsing through the navigation feed. Someone was jamming their system from outside. She didn't know who or why, but she knew how to fight back. Recalibrate heading east by 2 degrees, she ordered. It'll give the F-22's visual lock. F-22's, the captain echoed, startled. Reached for the spare headset hanging behind the seat. They're already here. She flicked the frequency switch, tuning the emergency channel. Static hissed, then cleared. Eagle lead, this is Raven Actual. Do you copy? The cockpit fell silent. The co-pilot's mouth parted in disbelief. Raven Actual, came the stunned reply through the speakers. Ma'am, confirm that's really you. Lips curved faintly. Affirmative, Captain Davis. You boys took long enough. On the other end, Davis exhaled audibly. Copy that, Raven. We've got eyes on you. Orders. The captain looked at her, utterly lost. You're Raven Actual, the Raven Actual. Didn't answer. She was too busy checking their altitude and stabilizer torque. Eagle lead, I need you tight on my left wing. Hawk 2, shadow starboard 200 meters. We're blind in here, be our eyes. Roger that, Davis replied, voice now sharp, professional. We've got you covered, ma'am. The co-pilot whispered under his breath. She just commanded Raptors like she never left the service. Adjusted the manual throttle. Because I never really did, she said, half to herself. Outside, the night exploded with motion. The 2 F-22s slid into formation beside the crippled 737, their sleek frames catching moonlight like blades of steel. Inside, passengers gasped as they spotted the fighters through the windows. Fear turned into stunned silence. Steadied the yoke, guiding it with the captain. Maintain altitude. Small corrections only, she instructed. We're operating blind without radar, but we've still got physics and discipline, and those are enough. Copy, Raven Actual, Davis said over comms. You're clear for descent toward if we can get you guidance. Negative, we've got limited control. I need 20 more minutes to stabilize her. Understood, we'll stay with you. His eyes softened for a fraction of a second. Appreciated, Eagle Lead. It's good to hear a friendly voice up here again. In the cabin, passengers watched the mysterious woman in the cockpit and the fighter jets outside, whispering to one another. No one understood who she was, but everyone could feel it, the shift from chaos to control. For the first time in an hour, the plane wasn't falling. Back at NORAD, technicians monitored the situation with wide eyes. Raven Actual has taken over flight command, one reported. Colonel Beck's voice cracked slightly. She's saving them, he murmured. Adjusted the radio once more, her tone steady and resolute. Eagle Lead, tell command I'm taking manual. We're going to bring this bird home the old-fashioned way. Davis's reply came back firm. Roger that, Raven Actual. Welcome back to the sky. His gaze locked on the horizon, cold, steady, fearless. Let's finish what we started. NORAD's command center, the air was thick with disbelief. Rows of radar screens glowed blue and green, every technician frozen at their stations. The words still echoed through the comms. Raven Actual, do you copy? Colonel Beck stood at the center of the floor, headset pressed tight to his ear. Confirm that call sign, he barked. The communications officer hesitated. Sir, the voice print matches. 99.7%, it's her. Beck's jaw tightened. That's impossible, Carter's dead. Silence. Then another voice chimed in from the analyst's bay. Sir, if that's true, she's flying a crippled 737 with 200 civilians aboard, and she's holding it together better than any pilot alive. Beck stared at the live feed. The F-22s escorting the passenger plane through dark clouds, one light flickering on the damaged wing. It didn't seem real. He'd served with once, back when her name, Raven Actual, had meant something. She'd been the youngest female squadron commander in Air Force history, fearless, calculated, a natural-born leader. Until that day over Nevada. Until the explosion that took her out of the sky and ended her career. Patch me through, Beck said finally. On the other end's voice filled the room, low and calm. NORAD command, this is Raven Actual, flight is stable, partial control regained. The entire command floor fell silent. Beck said, voice barely a whisper, we thought you were gone. There was a pause, long enough for every heartbeat in the room to count it. I was, she said simply. Now I'm just trying to bring 200 people home. Down in the cabin, passengers craned their necks toward the cockpit door, hearing only faint fragments of radio chatter. Mothers held children close. Businessmen gripped armrests with white knuckles. And through every small window, the sleek silhouettes of the F-22s flashed like guardian angels. In the sky, adjusted altitude again. The right engine coughed, then stabilized. Sweat trickled down her temple, but her hands never wavered. The captain beside her just stared, awed, useless but grateful. How do you even know those fighters? He asked quietly. Gave a small smile. Let's just say they used to take orders from me. Outside, the Raptors maintained their perfect diamond formation. Inside one of them, Captain Davis was speaking to his co-pilot, still processing what he'd heard. Raven Actual, she was the one who flew the Ghost Lance mission, right? Yeah, the co-pilot replied softly. She's the reason half our squadron came home. Back at NORAD, the feed now broadcast live on military networks. The story was spreading fast, across bases, newsrooms, and social media. Who is Raven Actual? Headlines began to appear. Pilots watching from different airfields recognized her call sign like a ghost from their past. Beck stood before the big screen, his voice steady now. "She's not just another passenger," he said. "She's the best damn pilot we ever had." The comms crackled again. His voice, "NORAD, this is Raven. We've stabilized, but we've lost hydraulic pressure in the right wing. I'll need vector clearance and ground prep." Beck straightened. "You've got it. Air Force Base is clearing runway 27 for emergency landing. You'll have F-22 escort all the way." "Copy that," replied. Then quieter, "Tell the tower to keep the lights on. I'm bringing my people home." For a second, Beck's throat tightened. He looked around the command floor, every officer standing silently at attention, as if welcoming back a legend. On social media, civilians were watching from the ground, phones pointed at the streaks of light cutting across the night sky. Comment threads filled with questions, speculation, awe. In one post, a veteran simply wrote, "Raven actuals back. God help whoever tried to bring her down." High above, the clouds parted just enough for moonlight to fall on the plane's silver fuselage. The call sign of its protector whispered through the radio waves like a legend reborn. And at 30,000 feet, Carter, once erased from the Air Force's history, took command of the sky once again. The first tremor hit at 24,000 feet. A deep metallic groan shuddered through the fuselage as turbulence rolled across the jet. Oxygen masks swayed, lights flickered, and a child began to cry in the back rows. His eyes darted to the panel. Hydraulic failure was spreading faster than expected. The right wing was losing control entirely. She leaned forward, adjusting manual pressure trim with steady, precise movements. "Captain, bleed pressure from auxiliary tank 2, she ordered. The captain hesitated. "That'll dump our reserves." "I know," said firmly. "It'll keep the flaps stable long enough to descend." Her hands moved like she was playing an old instrument, one she hadn't touched in years but never truly forgot. Each control, each sound, spoke to her in the silent language of flight. "Eagle lead, this is Raven," she called into her headset. "We're descending through 24,000, losing hydraulics. I'll need you visual all the way." Captain Davis's voice came steady from the F-22. "Copy that, Raven. We're with you. Is lighting the runway now." Outside the window, the two Raptors mirrored her every move, their wingtips glowing white against the black sky. Inside the cabin, the fear was almost physical, tight, heavy, unspoken. A flight attendant crept up the aisle, eyes wide. "Ma'am, people are panicking. They saw the lights flicker again." "Tell them," said without looking up, "the woman flying this plane hasn't crashed one yet." The attendant blinked, nodded, and hurried back. For a brief moment, the turbulence eased, used the silence to breathe. Her gaze softened as she looked through the windshield at the horizon, faint city lights glimmering far below. "I used to land Raptors in storms like this," she said quietly, "but this is heavier." The captain glanced at her. "Why'd you leave the Air Force?" Didn't answer immediately. Her eyes stayed fixed on the altimeter. "I didn't leave. I was forced out. Classified accident, bad politics. Easier to call me gone than admit command's mistake." "Until now," he said softly. Smiled faintly, "Until now." The plane lurched again hard. Warning alarms screamed. She grabbed the yoke and fought it back under control. A gust slammed the left wing, throwing the cabin into chaos. Trays crashed, passengers screamed. "Eagle lead, we're taking heavy crosswinds," reported, her voice calm as steel. "Copy, Raven, adjust heading 280, we'll block your drift." "Roger that." The F-22s tightened formation, cutting through the storm ahead, their vapor trails slicing white arcs in the darkness. On the ground, every radar screen in NORAD tracked the trio's slow, wavering descent. "Altitude 19,000 and dropping," a technician reported. "She's bringing it down by hand." Beck stood motionless, one hand over his heart. "She's doing what we thought was impossible," he whispered. At 15,000 feet, rechecked the stabilizers. The right side indicator was dead. The jet was listing dangerously. "Manual trim failing," she muttered. The co-pilot swallowed hard. "What do we do?" Took a deep breath. "We fly it like a bird with a broken wing. We lean into the pain." She adjusted engine thrust manually, counterbalancing the drag with micro-corrections that most pilots wouldn't dare attempt. Slowly, agonizingly, the plane leveled. "Good," she murmured. "Now we keep her steady." The intercom light blinked. A passenger's voice, trembling, tearful, came through from the cabin. "Who's flying this plane?" Press the button, her voice filling the cabin. "This is Captain Carter. Some of you might know me as Raven Actual. We've had a rough night, but we're going to make it home. Stay calm, stay seated, and trust me. We're going to land this bird together." The cabin fell silent. Then faintly someone started to clap. Within seconds, the entire plane was cheering through tears. Allowed herself a single, quiet smile. "Eagle lead," she said softly. "Let's bring them home." Outside, the storm began to thin. Through a tear in the clouds, the lights of Air Force Base glowed like salvation. Captain Davis's voice cracked over comms. "Raven Actual, the runway's yours." Adjusted her grip on the yoke. "Copy that, Eagle. Time to finish the mission." The descent continued, steady, controlled, and defiant. Above the roar of engines, the legend of Raven Actual soared once more. At 10,000 feet, the world had stopped breathing. Air traffic control lines buzzed across the East Coast. Cameras from news choppers captured the flicker of lights descending through the storm. The hashtag Raven Actual was trending worldwide before she even cleared the clouds. Inside the cockpit, Carter's hands were steady on the yoke. The right engine's output fluctuated, sputtering like an exhausted heart. Hydraulic pressure was near zero. Every system screamed failure. "Altitude 9,000, the co-pilot called. "Runway lights confirmed." Exhaled slowly. "Good, we're almost home." The captain turned to her, pale but resolute. "If we don't get gear extension, we'll have to belly land." "I'm aware." She toggled the landing gear lever. Nothing. No sound, no motion. The indicator stayed dark. "Manual override." She nodded, already on it. Reached for the emergency crank under the console, the same mechanism she'd drilled hundreds of times in the Air Force. She twisted it slowly, every muscle straining. Metal creaked somewhere beneath the floor. In the cabin, passengers were praying aloud. Others clutched photos, hands trembling. The storm outside was thinning, revealing a moonlit patch of sky and two F-22s gliding faithfully beside them. Captain Davis's voice crackled over comms. "Raven, you're looking good. We've got full visuals. Runway 27 is clear." "Copy, Eagle lead. Gear extension partial, flaps minimal. We're coming in hot." "Understood. We'll shadow you to touchdown." At 5,000 feet, the plane jolted hard left. A violent gust slammed the wing, spinning them slightly off course. The passengers screamed. The co-pilot yelled, "She's rolling." Snuckles went white on the controls. "Not today," she snapped. She cut thrust on the left engine, countered with right rudder, and rolled the jet back level. In the NORAD control room, technicians were shouting data across the floor. "Speed 220 knots, angle high. She's fighting crosswind drift." Beck's voice cut through the noise. "She's doing it, just like Nevada 2011. At 3,000 feet, could see the runway lights stretching like a lifeline through the rain. But then another alarm blared, engine 2 fail. The right engine was gone. The captain swore, "We've lost starboard thrust." His reply was soft but unshaken, "Then we'll land on one." "It's not possible." She cut him off, "I've done worse." She adjusted trim manually, rebalanced the thrust from the remaining engine, and locked the yoke at a precise 3-degree angle. The plane began its final descent, one engine dead, hydraulics gone, and 200 souls depending on a legend thought long dead. Eagle lead, this is Raven actual. Engine 2 is out. I'll need you clear on touchdown, full runway sweep. Davis's voice cracked slightly. Copy Raven, will clear your path, Godspeed. His eyes locked on the glowing line ahead. Not God, she murmured, just discipline. At 1,500 feet the wind shifted violently again. Lightning split the horizon. The 737 dropped like a stone. Alarms shrieked. The captain's hands flew over the switches, panic taking hold. Pull up, we're sinking too fast. Ease it, commanded, her tone calm and razor-sharp. Ease it, don't fight her, feel her. She pulled gently on the yoke, coaxing the crippled jet back into glide. The airframe groaned in protest. At 500 feet, the runway filled the windshield. The world below erupted in flashing lights, emergency vehicles, cameras, soldiers, civilians, all waiting. NORAD watched in silence. Beck gripped the console, whispering, "Come on, Raven." His mind went perfectly quiet. The storm vanished. Time slowed. She could hear only her own heartbeat and the hum of one surviving engine. 200 feet, the co-pilot breathed. Whispered back, "Flare." She eased the nose up. The ground surged closer. Tires screeched as the main gear slammed into the runway hard. The right side collapsed, metal sparks bursting like fireworks. The fuselage skidded, fishtailing violently. "Brace," shouted. The jet slid, screamed, tore through puddles, and finally came to a grinding, shuddering stop. Smoke filled the air, silence followed. Then through the haze, the first cheer broke out from the cabin. Let out the breath she didn't know she'd been holding. "Eagle lead," she said hoarsely into the headset. "Raven's home." Captain Davis's reply was pure awe. "Welcome back, ma'am. Welcome home." Outside raced toward the wreck, lights flashing red and blue. Inside, passengers cried, hugged, and prayed in disbelief. Closed her eyes, her trembling hands still gripping the yoke. She had done it. Again. The rain was still falling when the emergency crews reached the wreck. Steam rose from the twisted metal as red and blue lights flickered across the wet tarmac. Firefighters sprayed foam around the right wing, shouting through the storm. Inside the cabin, passengers stumbled to their feet, sobbing, hugging strangers. The fear that had once gripped every soul turned into stunned relief. Every eye searched for the woman who had brought them home. Carter unbuckled her harness, her fingers trembling for the first time. The adrenaline was gone. What was left was exhaustion and disbelief. The captain turned to her, eyes wet. "I've never seen anyone fly like that," he whispered. "You just saved 200 lives." Gave a small, tired smile. "That's what pilots are supposed to do." As she stood, her legs wobbled slightly. The co-pilot caught her arm. "Ma'am, are you all right?" "I'll live," she said softly. "Can't say the same for the hydraulic system." When she opened the cockpit door, the cabin erupted into applause. People clapped, cried, shouted her name without even knowing who she was. For a moment, froze, overwhelmed by the gratitude, the sheer human noise of it all. Outside, Captain Davis and his wingman had already landed their Raptors nearby. They sprinted toward the wreck as the crew opened the emergency exits. Davis spotted her through the smoke, the same woman who had once commanded him in the skis. He stopped in his tracks, saluted sharply. "Ma'am," he said, voice thick, "permission to say it's damn good to see you alive." Returned the salute, her eyes glistening. "Good to see you still follow orders, Captain." He grinned, always Raven actual. By dawn, the story had spread nationwide. News stations replayed the footage of the fiery landing. Headlines blazed. "Missing Air Force pilot SAVES 212 in miracle landing." The return of Raven actual. At Air Force Base, a small press crowd gathered behind security lines. Beyond them, military personnel stood at attention as, still in the soaked clothes she'd worn on the flight, stepped down the tarmac under her own power. Colonel Beck was waiting. His face was older now, lined with years of command and guilt. When their eyes met, words failed him. "You should told me," he finally said. "I tried," replied. "They buried the truth faster than I could speak it." Beck's jaw tightened. "That crash over Nevada, we all thought." "They told you I died so they could bury the mission," she said quietly. "It wasn't pilot error. It was sabotage, classified op. They erased me to protect someone higher up." He lowered his head. "And you stayed silent all these years." "I wasn't done flying," she said simply, "and tonight proved it." A nurse approached, insisting she go to the hospital, but waved her off. "I'll go after the passengers. They come first." Beck looked at her like a man seeing a ghost-turned hero. "You know what this means, don't you?" Nodded. The world finally remembers who Raven Actual was. Across the base, a small group of Air Force cadets watched her quietly. One whispered, "That's her. That's the woman from the training tapes." Another said, "She's real." Overheard, smiling faintly. "Still real," she murmured. Hours later, she sat alone near the hangar, watching the sunrise cut through the thinning clouds. The roar of an F-22 taking off in the distance made her glance up instinctively. The sound brought memories rushing back, her squadron, her lost wingmen, the sky she once commanded. Davis approached and placed a folded flight patch beside her. It was old, faded, black and silver, the emblem of the Raven Squadron. "Thought you might want it back," he said. Traced the worn stitching with her fingertips. "I never really lost it," she whispered. He hesitated. "Command wants you reinstated. Full honors, they're calling it a miracle." She smiled sadly. "No miracle, just training, instinct, and a little unfinished business." Davis saluted once more, then turned to leave. Looked up at the breaking sky, golden light piercing through dark clouds. For the first time in years, she felt peace. "Raven Actual to all wings," she whispered under her breath, as if speaking to ghosts. "Mission accomplished." The wind carried her words away, higher and higher, back to the place she belonged. And above the awakening capital, the sky remembered her name.